Hi there, I'm April Callis-Birchmeier. I'm a project management professional and certified change management professional, CCMP. And today I'm thrilled to have you join me to talk about how to deal with change in the workplace. We go through so much change in the workplace. It's happening all around us all the time. And so it feels like a funny question. How do we deal with change in the workplace? But it's really an important question because so many times we can deal with some change in the workplace, but then all of a sudden it feels like we get kind of full of too much change and not maybe enough communication around that change. And we can get really frustrated and aggravated with the amount of change. So let's talk today a little bit about how to deal with change in the workplace. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that make people feel resistant about the impact of too much change in the workplace, how to take care of yourself and others during the change, and then we'll also talk about how can we sort of minimize this effect, this oversaturation sometimes of change. So we'll talk about all of these things as well as how to apply some of these practical tips, and obviously we'll give you some strategies as well. So let's get started. When I'm thinking about change on the workplace, you know, any type of a change, an organizational change, can be, a process change or procedure change. It could be a technological change, like a new system, or a technology change, like new hardware, new laptops, new computers, or it can be something along the lines of, a program that just is put into place, and there's a lot of policy or rules around that program. But whatever that change looks like, the people who are the end users, the stakeholders who are actually going to be using this change or implementing this change, um, really feel it the most. And many times when we're in a leadership role, we don't always appreciate or we don't see all of the other changes that our particular stakeholder group may be struggling with. And I think this is a really interesting topic because I have tried for a number of years, and I have some methods of sharing this, but I've tried for a number of years to show the stakeholder group that we're kind of focusing on as the center, and then all of the different change impacts that are hitting that stakeholder group, possibly at the same time, maybe a week or two away from each other. And it's important to have this sort of change impact map, if you will, to ensure that the same stakeholder group is not being expected to absorb and adopt multiple changes all at the same time. And this is the hard part for many leaders, is that they can't see the other changes that that stakeholder group may be hit with, may be adopting, may be trying to adapt to and negotiate with. Um, they see their change. They see the change that they are sponsors of, or that they are leading in some way. So when we think about the impact that all of this change can have on the workplace, a couple of different things can happen. When people have too much change and not enough time to absorb this change, we call that change saturation. And I think of change saturation as though you had a sponge and you poured 2 or 3 glasses of water into that sponge, and you never get a chance to wring out the sponge. You just keep pouring more water in. Well, at some point, that sponge is completely saturated and can no longer absorb any new information, any new water, any new change. So change saturation is when we've poured so much change onto a particular stakeholder or stakeholder group that they can no longer absorb anymore. And this leads to burnout, frustration, high turnover. We sometimes see people just declare that they plan to retire. And sometimes people, unfortunately, will retire but keep their job, and they just kind of wait it out. So this can be a really difficult impact to deal with. Another impact of change on the workplace sometimes is that people get uh, resistant to it. And we'll talk about some different types of resistance. But when you see resistance, it can usually look like either a pressure back, so kind of a push back on the change, or just a checking out, an ignoring of the change. I'm just not going to do it. I don't plan to adopt it. Or it can show up as anger and aggravation. Sometimes I think also it can show up as behaviors that are sort of disguised, such as delays and finding fault and claiming there's not enough detail. So we'll go through some of those pieces. But I do think that one of the uh, risks of having so much change in our workplace is that sometimes it drives people to become negative in their behavior. They start to show up in some negative, with some negative habits. And when I'm talking about negative habits, the types of habits I'm talking about are things like people rolling their eyes. We know that eye rolling is a habit, and it's also a habit that sort of communicates and indicates contempt. So when someone is rolling their eyes about something that their leader is saying or a colleague is saying, and they are not doing it in jest to the person, but about that person, that's usually a sign of contempt. And John Gottman of the Love Lab has studied this for a number of years. And I know the first time that I heard this, eye rolling is a sign of contempt, information from one of his studies, was at a time when I still had all three of my daughters at home. They were young, and I told the two oldest girls that we could not roll our eyes because it was a sign of contempt. Do not roll eyes in this house. It's a sign of contempt, and we are not going to be contemptuous. Because the problem with contempt is that it's the most destructive type of emotion that individuals can have. So they said, "Of course, no problem, mommy." And then my little one ran in and she said, "Mommy, play Barbies with me." And I said, "Okay." And they said, "Contempt, contempt." And I was completely busted. So recognize that eye rolling is a negative habit that sometimes crops up when we're under all of this stress from change. Another negative habit that I see is sort of the verbal equivalent, I think, of the eye roll, which is the tisk, right? That noise, that sound. And if you've ever been the victim of a tisk and sigh, as I have been, or maybe you've been even the participant in a tisk and sigh, you know, and I know that it means, oh my gosh, very dismissive, and so demeaning because it's really passing judgment. It's really saying, I can't believe I have to put up with this. And so many times I'll listen, particularly when we're announcing a change or we're announcing another change, perhaps. I'll listen and hear if to try to hear if there's a lot of on the Zoom call or in person. The third habit that sometimes people fall into, which can be a negative habit, is sarcasm and quips. And now this is a tough one for me because I love sarcasm and I love to be sarcastic. I think I'm funny. Sometimes I get a little laugh when I say something sarcastic. You might be in that same place too. But let me tell you that sarcasm gets old very quickly because it's a little bit addictive. You know, when you get a laugh from somebody for some comment that you've made, you look for opportunities to make more comments, and pretty soon you have a habit. And when you have a habit, people start to tire of this sarcasm. People start to think, oh my gosh, do you never have anything good to say? I remember one time I was in a sarcastic habit. I had become a sarcastic quipster at in a role that I was working in. And I hadn't realized how habitual it had become. I used to make sarcastic quips to my friends in the back because those of us who are sarcastic quipsters like to sit in the back row of meetings. So we have a lot of room to be sarcastic. And I was sitting in the back and I used to say comments, make little comments, and my friends would laugh. But one time, really, I remember so clearly, I was always looking for this opportunity. And it had just become sort of part of me at that point. And I remember they were talking about how we were going to start some work and all of the exciting pieces that were going along with this new project. And I remembered that they had talked about something like this 2 or 3 months before. And so I just sat back and waited. And then I said, with my little sarcastic quip barb, I just waited while everyone got excited and this big balloon of hope started to fill. And I just said, I remember hearing something like this 3 months ago. I think I have deja vu. And I threw that little sarcastic barb forward and popped the balloon of hope. And everybody was frustrated and angry with me. And I was shocked because they usually liked what I said, but they did not like it. They had no appreciation at all for my sarcastic comment. And they told me to please stop saying sarcastic comments all the time. They were just so frustrated with me. And I was surprised, really stunned. And so I had to break my habit. And that was not easy. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to break a bad habit, but it's not something you want to do frequently. And then the fourth one that I have sometimes seen in workplaces and at home also is the yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. When we tell someone yes, but, are we saying yes? Really? I think we're saying no. I think we're saying, yes, but we tried that, which means no. Yes, but we don't have time, which means no. Yes, but I don't like it, which means no. What if we change the wording? What if we change that wording of this habit, which is a habit? And if you have any coworkers who ask for things frequently and you have to say, yes, but we can't do that. Yes, but we don't have budget. You may be in the yes, but habit as well. We could change this habit to be and. Yes, and, which is what improv actors do, right? They say yes to the opportunity and they add to it in some way. And this yes and can free you from saying no all the time to everything. Imagine if you asked your leader, can we have some sort of celebration at the end of this project? And they say, yes, but we don't have any money and we don't really have time. It's a clear no. What if they said, yes, and you'll have to figure out how to pay for it and when we'll find time? The and opens the door to possibilities. The and does not shut you completely down. So I think this is a good tool, a great way to sort of combat the habit that we may get into of saying yes, but all the time. Then we have the what I like to call competitive griping habit. And this competitive griping habit is when we are trying to be helpful, trying to be social, and trying to be empathetic to people who are maybe having an issue. But I'll tell you how it shows up. The bad habit part of it shows up as a competitive sort of topping situation. So you might have had this situation occur in your life at some point in time where someone tells you, boy, I'm having a really tough time. I'm having some health problems. I'm going to have, maybe a knee replacement. I'm kind of nervous about this whole thing. And you want to be empathetic. But the way we end up talking to people who are telling us things like this sometimes is that we compete with them and we say, oh, you're having a knee replacement. I had both knees replaced. I had no way to, I had both knees replaced. They put them on my elbows. I don't know what. It works great. I mean, we are trying hard to be empathetic and to share that we have been through or know someone who has been through something similar and they're okay. So, you'll be okay too. But instead of it coming across as supportive, listening, and empathetic, we end up griping and tapping them. Oh, really? Well, I had both knees replaced and both hips all in the same day. I really had a tough time for a couple of weeks there, but you'll be fine. And the message I'm trying to send is you'll be fine. That's the message I'm trying to send. I think you're pretty okay. I'm supportive of you. I've heard of this before, and I think you'll be all right. But what it comes across is sort of this dismissiveness. That's just, I don't care what's going on with you. I know someone who had it worse. So that's the person who had to walk to school uphill both ways. So I think it's easy to fall into and have a habit like this. And sometimes it just happens in the break room. And before you know it, off we go. The sixth habit that I see frequently is the garter or the martyr in workplaces. And this is an interesting habit. This can either be one person playing both parts of this, or two people each doing one of these pieces. There's no limit. But the garter is that person in your workplace who may have been, who is close to power. Let's say it that way. They might have been friends with the person who's now the supervisor. Maybe they were coworkers previously and they're still close. Or maybe they're just physically in a place, in a location that's close to the supervisor or manager or director. And for whatever reason, this person has access to information. They hear things or they're told things, and they're told they can't share these things they hear, which they don't. But what they do share is the fact that they have this information. So a garter might show up by saying to you, hey, I'm not sure if you're aware of this. We're going to have kind of a lot of changes in our organization. I can't tell you anything, but I think you might want to know and just kind of be aware that things are shifting. It's so aggravating, isn't it? They will not tell you what they know, but they'll tell you that they know. And so this garter role can sometimes be a habit that people kind of fall into and share with others when they're feeling very negative, and they find that they have this little bit of information that they can tell people, not the information itself, but the fact that they have it, the fact that they know something that you don't know. And then on the opposite, kind of the similar path of the garter is the martyr. And the martyr is that person in many workplaces who will just do anything for anyone, but they never let them forget it. So this person might say, oh no, you go off to lunch. I'll stay here and answer the phones. Maybe sends the entire office out. Everybody gets back and they say, oh, we had 189 phone calls in the last hour. I'm totally worn out. Now, they have volunteered for the effort, but then they want recognition, and it's sort of a self-sacrificing position, right? And the only way you can be a martyr is to sacrifice yourself, to be sacrificial. And so that can sometimes be really irritating. One of my students one time told me that they felt like the martyr was the person that would give you the shirt off of their back, but never let you forget it. And I like that description. And then finally, we have the wine and dine. And wine and dine tends to be this phenomenon that we've all experienced, I think. And this can become a bad habit as well. It can become a habit of negativity, I'll say. And having the wine and dine is that situation where we go out to lunch with our coworkers or maybe out for a drink or dinner after work. And we start out just talking about normal things. And before you know it, we are whining and dining about work. We are whining about our boss and the people that we work with and so here and the customer that drove us crazy. And it goes on and on and on. And this is a very difficult habit to break. This negative habit is a tough one because it's very situational. And so it seems as though even when you have a wine and dine session with someone, and I'm not talking about Chardonnay, right? Even when you have a wine and dine session about someone with other people, and you vow to yourself, I will never do that again. I can tell you from my own experience that all the vows that you make will make no difference when you go back to that situation and you are again having a meal together, having some drinks together, and before you know it, you find yourself in this wine and dine situation. I think all of us have probably been in a wine and dine situation at some point in time. And the problem with it is, I mean, there's many problems with it, but one of the biggest problems in terms of negativity is that you feel terrible. When you go back to work, you feel like you're walking through quicksand. When you are talking to people that you've been whining and dining about, you feel terrible. When people find out that you're part of this wine and dine, you're going to be seen as a wine and diner. So it is a difficult habit, but it can be ended. And I think the only way I've ever been able to end the wine and dine habit is to really just stop going because it's difficult to resist. So those are some habits of negativity that I sometimes see. When I see a lot of change in an organization, when I see all this going on, it makes me anxious because I know these are habits that are um, easily crop up in the midst of change. Another thing is that I think it's easy to feel like we're a victim sometimes when we're dealing with a lot of change. And so it's finding things that we can hold on to, finding something that's not changing, some one thing, two things that are not changing, and really holding on to the things that are not changing can be extremely helpful. Because when I discover things that are not changing, and I'm able to say, oh, this is going to stay the same, it really makes a big difference for me. So I'm going to share with you now some other things that I have seen in terms of resistance and negative habits, negative behavior coming because of change, too much change going on in the workplace. I'm sharing with you my my resistance response, my resistance response avatars that I teach in my Ready, Set, Change training. And I have four avatars here. I've got the commander who can turn into a fighter. I have the socializer who turns into a saboteur. I have the understander who turns into an underminer, and a detailer who can turn into a derailer. And so the first name is what these folks are good at. The commander is great at leading change, promoting change, very supportive. The socializer is a social connector, very good at helping people gain social acceptance of a change and to understand it. Our understander really provides a lot of stability in many of our organizations, and uh, they are the kind of linchpin, if you will, of helping other people understand what something means to them at work. And then our detailer uses a lot of detailed information. They really love to deeply understand the change. But when we activate the resistance mode, when we have a lot of change in our organization, or maybe we have forgotten to talk to people about the change, they are learning about it on the day we go live because we didn't even remember that we should tell them, then we have this resistance response. And so our resistance response is this second name on each of the avatars, where the commander turns into a fighter, and the fighter actively speaks against the change. The fighter will go and sometimes even fight with the project team or with the folks who they've been supporting all along. Then we sometimes have the socializer will turn into the saboteur, and that's when that social butterfly, social connector who's so good with people will start to become a sarcastic quipster. They'll start to do things that sabotage the communication, perhaps. The underminer or the understander sometimes gets into a resistant mode and becomes an underminer. They start to undermine the change by telling people they just don't plan to adopt it. They don't believe in it. They don't think it's a good idea, and they're hoping it goes away. And then we have our detailer who becomes a derailer when they are resistant. And the reason that they become a derailer is they start to stall and delay and want more details. And they can really put a project off the schedule completely because they are very analytical and they get analysis paralysis and they will not budge. And so they can become very resistant, very frustrating. So there's some tactics we can use here with these resistor avatars. And that is that our commanders need to stay updated, need to stay up to date on all the latest information. They should never feel surprised or that someone knows more than they do. Because when that happens, they start to get frustrated and fight. They feel that they are being excluded or that somebody has gotten ahead of them, and it can be extremely frustrating. For our socializers who become the saboteurs, I think keeping them engaged by inviting them to meetings, inviting them to events, asking them to volunteer at these meetings and events, that can be really engaging for the socializers to pull them out of that saboteur behavior. Or we're talking about our understanders who can become underminers. We can help them not undermine us by involving them, by getting their hands in the project, getting their hands in the change, including them as user acceptance testers or change agents, perhaps, or maybe even sign them up to perform some training. And then our detailers who become derailers, many times we can help them to stay out of that resistance, to not fall into the resistant mode. If we can schedule time every week to have a calm, thorough meeting with them, we send them an agenda in advance, we study and prepare for that meeting, then they may be ready to really address what they're worried about quickly and to understand timelines, because we've given it to them in advance. We haven't sort of sprung it on them. And when they understand the timeline, they can, start to disrupt their own analysis paralysis and get moving forward to ensure that they are providing a recommendation, but not a blockage on our project. So I think many times this framework, these resistance avatars are again showing some of the negative habits, negative behaviors that we see when there's so much change going on at work. When that's happening, it really is important that we have a way to deal with them and that we can minimize this resistance on change, that we can minimize these bad habits that we fall into when we start to feel negative towards change. So I'm really happy to share this with you. I'm excited to hear from you. So please feel free to post comments so that we can continue our conversation. But I'd love to tell you about our Ready, Set, Change accelerated training and exam prep. And that starts on our final cohort for the year, starts on September 23rd. And it is a 21-hour qualified education provider course for ACMP, which means that it will qualify you to take your CCMP exam, your Certified Change Management Professional exam. And in addition to qualifying you to take the exam, this course also helps you to apply for the exam, prepare for the exam, and pass the exam. It's not an easy exam. So it's a really important opportunity to be able to really dive in to not only the READY framework, which is the framework that I've written about and that I teach, but to also really dive in and understand the standard for change management and to prepare for and pass your CCMP exam. So that is available. You can enroll now. We will be filling up soon. We've already got several people enrolled in our cohort. We can only take a certain number. So please take a look at www.springboard-consult.com. So springboard-consult.com. And you can look under the Academy and you'll see that training there. I hope this has been helpful to you to think about how difficult it is and how to deal with change in the workplace. We will be talking about many more topics around change, but this one really speaks to me because I want to help you avoid some of those resistance behaviors, those negative behaviors, and those habits that sometimes crop up when we're saturating people with a lot of change. So until next time, I've had a great time talking with you. Please take a look at our Ready, Set, Change course, and I hope to see you soon.